Hey everyone, welcome to the show. Today I'm going to be interviewing Jeff Evely. You might have seen his face plastered all over social media. He's been a really busy man as of late. Jeff Evely is a retired master warrant officer of the Canadian Armed Forces. He's a veteran. He served for over 20 years. He went to Afghanistan in 2009, Iraq in 2019, and he also served with NORAD from 2010 to 2014. He's helped defend Canada and North American airspace. He retired in 2021 and returned back to Nova Scotia thinking he was just going to have a really nice and quiet life here. But he continued to serve his community. He coached boxing in Nova Scotia. He taught MMA in Afghanistan. He supported junior cheerleading and softball in Florida. He continued to lead efforts supporting homeless veterans in Ottawa through Soldiers Helping Soldiers. This is someone that cares deeply about other people. Now, the recent controversy is around Nova Scotia's sweeping ban on accessing Crown land by foot, meaning no hiking, fishing, camping, or ATV use allowed because of the wildfires. Now, there are things that are reasonable and things that are not so reasonable, and we witnessed that with COVID. In this particular situation, Evely filmed himself calmly telling Conservative officers, "I'm going to go into the woods. I don't want to make any trouble." And he just walked into the woods and got a fine for over $28,000. This is what is accumulating all the debate. The video went super viral. It struck a huge chord online, with many people praising his stance, framing this as a supreme example of government overreach, with others attacking him as just another right-winged extremist. Evely is also a political candidate for the People's Party of Canada. This is a conversation about civil liberties, about what's reasonable and rational, and also perhaps the art of war. Mainstream media is doing what mainstream media does. They're painting Jeff as just, again, another right-winged extremist. But I'm hearing a totally different story about a man who loves this country, a veteran, and someone who gives it all to take care of his community. I want to read you something here. I thought this was an excellent post by Ellie Canton Nantel on Twitter. She says the issue with the Nova Scotia wildfire prevention hiking ban, with threats of $25,000 in fines and a snitch line, aka a climate lockdown, is the same issue that came with COVID lockdowns, restrictions and mandates, protest bans, as well as the removal of American liquor from the store shelves. When you chip away at civil liberties, it's a dangerous, slippery slope. The defenders, which in this case include people who identify as conservative, will say, this is justified because, and point to something that sounds like a reasonable concern, in this case, preventing devastating wildfires. Sure, but once you accept that logic, it can easily be extended and applied to almost anything. With COVID shutting down the economy for 2 weeks to flatten the curve, it seemed reasonable to most Canadians. But that quickly became nearly 2 years of lockdowns, including when 90% of the population was vaccinated, because we didn't want hospitals to be overwhelmed. It led to mandatory masking for everyone, young children, people with disabilities, and even those with 3 vaccine doses. In Quebec, it led to police-enforced curfews. It's for the greater good, you see. We're all in this together. It then escalated to people being banned from public life for not taking a vaccine, people losing their jobs, and in British Columbia being denied medical exemptions. In Quebec, it went as far as fining the unvaccinated, effectively making vaccination mandatory. Let's also talk about banning protests. It was pitched for abortion clinics with the argument that women getting abortions shouldn't be harassed, something that again seemed reasonable to most Canadians. But that logic was then applied to protests again against drag queen story hours. And now it's being pushed for almost any protest deemed offensive or unsafe. Banning protests was also done during COVID on the basis that we don't want people to get sick. Pulling American liquor from shelves was floated as a negotiation tool at the start of the year. It rolled out everywhere. Now in August, most Canadian consumers still can't buy American wine or liquor at liquor stores because the government has decided that it knows best. And now we're at Nova Scotia, as well as New Brunswick, because bad ideas in Canada spread like wildfire. No pun intended. Do we really want to go down this road? Because I fear that it won't stop here. How long before we see bans on eating red meat, flying on airplanes, or engaging in other activities, all in the name of saving the planet? Because the arguments being made right now for the ban have the same foundations as those made to justify the worst excesses of COVID mandates and restrictions, and will be the same ones to use to justify further climate lockdowns. When you give authoritarianism an inch, it takes a mile. Freedom and personal responsibility must always take priority. We need to end this trend of increasingly authoritarian collectivism we're seeing in Canada. Full stop. Is walking in the forest with a pair of sneakers a fire hazard? Or is it reasonable to ban campfires? This is the conversation that we're going to have today about protecting our civil liberties, about where this could go, and also about the media's treatment when someone as brave as Jeff is willing to actually risk punishment to highlight what's actually happening here in Canada. But you guys be the judge. Listen to this conversation and then hit me up in the comment section after. This episode is brought to you by the Sovereign CEO Scale Program. Guys, I'm working with awake entrepreneurs who have a proven offer that helps people. They have a way to get people results. They're passionate about business, but more importantly, about helping other people. Check out the show notes for more information. Or if you're an awake business owner, I have a free community running right now. It's called The Vault. It's all about visibility, branding, getting more people into your sphere. If that is you, if you're ready to get yourself to a stronger, more powerful place so that you can rise above all the nonsense that's happening in 2025, you want to make a difference and you want to grow your business at the same time, this is the place. Check out the show notes for more on this. With that, guys, let's get into my interview here with Jeff Evely. All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of The Sovereign CEO. I'm Carla Joy Treadway, and I have with me today Jeff Evely. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. I was just saying before we hit the record, you've been very, very busy. I believe you just got off InfoWars before you hopped on with me. You got quite the story to tell.
Apparently. Yeah, I really wasn't expecting it to take off as much as it did, especially the first video I did, which was just kind of me goofing around in the park saying, this is the woods and this is not the woods. And now that one, honestly, that was the first day that they had put up the yellow tape, keeping me out of certain sections of the park near my house. And I was actually incredibly pissed at the time that I made that video, so I needed to blow off some steam. The thing is that the last time they brought in a blanket woods ban during the 2023 Nova Scotia wildfires, I thought that was an overreach at that time because it was a blanket ban across the province and there were no active fires on Cape Breton Island where I lived. So I submitted a judicial review standing on my charter rights, and ultimately the court declined to hear it, saying I could not stand on my rights alone in a Canadian court. There had to be money involved. And had I gotten a fine, then I would have had standing. So when they came out with it this time, I knew I had to go get a fine in order to drag Tim Houston into court. And so I was a little miffed about that, and I decided to take a couple of days and kind of, dial it back a bit, bring the temperature down, and blow off a little bit of steam before I went down to Department of National Resources to deal with that confrontation with the conservation officers. And I'm glad I did, because it did go well in the end.
Mm-hmm. And, this is how the courts are getting away with all of this, right? There's all these loopholes. There's no money involved, so we can't actually take this seriously, or it's a moot point because it's over now. It's over now. And we know the courts in Canada take forever. I mean, look at Chris and Tamara. We have the longest trial being dragged out. But what I really appreciate about what you're doing is when they're actually faced with having to deal with this and go to court, they will lose. So they do whatever they can to deflect, to defer, so they don't actually have to deal with the issue. And you're trying to make them face things head on.
Yeah, I had that experience during COVID too, because I was arrested a couple of times for refusing to mask. And the first time they charged me with obstructing. and I wrote a charter defense and submitted it. Now, that was a mistake on my part because I'm just an amateur lawyer. I should have played that hand a little closer to my vest, but I'm used to the military grievance system, so you submit everything. So I submitted my defense, and when I showed up for my day in court, the judge was like, well, none of the witnesses showed up, so case dismissed. Hang the gavel, and I was on my way. So the cops didn't show up, the Crown didn't show up, the complainant, the witnesses, nobody showed up. And the second one, they gave me the $2,600 fine under the Provincial Health Act violation. And I did the same thing. I submitted my charter defense ahead of time. And then 2 days before I was due to appear in court, they withdrew the charges. So I've stood in open court since then on another case because I'm taking the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission to court as well. And I stood in open court and I said it was all a shakedown. They always knew that that this was never going to hold up in court. They put these massive fines out there to deter people from even trying. And when I called them out on it, sure enough, they folded and they didn't even show up in court. So these measures at some point need to be tested in a court. And hopefully we do get it this time. And I'm hoping that the public awareness campaign in which I am presently engaged will have a lot to do with that. Mm-hmm. I think that, the more awareness we have, especially internationally, thank you so much, InfoWars, for having me on, I think that'll make these judges and politicians think twice on how they deal with this moving forward.
100%. Let's backpedal just a little bit. What got you involved in this political sphere, political activism to begin with? You were a veteran. What started you on this journey where you're confronting the government and government overreach?
Well, I was pretty familiar with government corruption and overreach, having spent 20 years in Canada's military and dealing with the notorious corruption there. And then I was medically released in January of 2021. I took possession of my retirement home here in Nova Scotia on 1 November 2021, and that was the same day that the vaccine passports came into effect. So I was just in time to be barred from doing all the things that I needed to do, like maybe go to the Legion that's crawling distance from my house. And when I tried, the Legion refused me service. So I bought one of their hats that says "Lest We Forget," and I crossed out the last with a black marker, and I put some pins on there, like from my service, Iraq, Afghanistan, NIMEG, and NORAD, this kind of thing. And then I just started going out defying mandates and getting arrested, wearing my mask. And this is the cause that I really signed up to serve. There's no such thing as human dignity without human liberty, and so I found all of these measures to be rather dehumanizing and obviously illegal. So, I was taught when I went to basic training that I had a duty to defy illegal orders. And of course, the question that always comes from the group in that situation is, well, how am I going to know if the order is illegal? Well, you use your own judgment. And am I going to be protected when they come after me for defying that order? No, you're going to go in front of a judge and you're going to have that order tested legally. And if you're wrong, then you're going to end up charged under the National Defense Act. Now, why would we impose such a heavy burden on our young people? It's because that is the only thing that separates us from Nazis. So I saw it really as just doing a civic duty, sticking to the same principles that had guided me throughout the course of my entire life. And, this, I guess, is what it looks like. I ended up eventually, like when the trucker convoy fired up, I went straight for that. I got arrested there. I got arrested again when we did Rolling Thunder, which was the wreath laying ceremony to bring dignity back to the war monument and the veterans who were drug off it and beaten. But I breached my conditions to not return to the red zone in order to do that. So they came out and rearrested me and barred me from the whole city of Ottawa. So I had to stop my march with James Topshort about 50 kilometers away from the monument. I have to be the only veteran in Canadian history to be barred from the National War Monument for 2.5 years, by the way, because the civic boundary for the Greater Ottawa area is all the way out in Arnprior. So I did a little video by the Arnprior sign for that one. And also I was co-organizer for the 1 Million March for Children nationally. And I've been in court, like I said, multiple cases before the courts. Just was denied an appeal for my convoy charges there recently. I ran in the last federal election in my home riding of Sydney Glace Bay as a People's Party candidate, and now I'm doing this.
Wow. I mean, you're really showing people what we actually have to do. Everyone is terrified of consequences, but the consequences that most people are scared of are so minuscule. People are afraid of their reputation being tarnished. They're afraid of getting trolled online. And you're here saying, you know what? I'm actually willing to go to prison. I'm willing to get a $28,000 plus fine. And so far, like what have been the most severe consequences that you've actually experienced? Like right now we have this looming fine, but we don't know that that's actually going to do anything. What consequences have actually like seriously come through?
I think, I've received like nasty messages from all the most awful people in Canada, and I don't really see that as a consequence because it just makes
Mm-hmm.
it easier for me to tell who the good and bad guys are. They make it really easy to tell who the bad guys are. They are sick people, and they drag my
Yeah.
service into it every single time reliably. Again, just this utter disregard, this disrespect for veterans and their
Mm-hmm.
sacrifice and so on and so forth. But so they make it really easy for me to tell who the to go back to what you said initially there, if we don't shoulder these burdens now, then we pass them on to future generations of Canadians.
Mm-hmm.
We sing we stand on guard for thee because at one time we understood that rights need to be asserted, and these rights and these freedoms, they are a legacy. They're the legacy of our
Mm-hmm.
fallen soldiers, and we have a sacred civic duty to carry on that legacy. That's why we say we stand on guard for thee. So if we don't do it, then these problems get passed down to future generations. That was, I guess, the vein in which I initially went to Afghanistan. Not that that ended up doing any good in the end, but had it not been for Joe Biden, it could have been one less war that future generations would have to fight. So, that's my idea of leaving something better for the next generation. I don't know what else to do with my life. What am I supposed to do with my time here? So yeah, I mean, leaving something better for the next generation, one less war to fight. That was sabotaged, obviously. But yeah, I think this is our duty, and this is a great legacy that we should carry on.
Seems like there aren't a lot of men, and I don't like to point the finger at men. It's women too, but I guess I'm more of a traditionalist. There aren't a lot of men willing to put themselves out there in an uncomfortable place. They're not willing to say the thing, let alone do the thing. Like when we look back on COVID, like there were men that genuinely believed that it was a good decision and that this thing worked and they should go and do it. Like fair enough. But there were so many men that knew it was BS, knew it didn't work, knew it was harmful, and they said, "You know what? I'm just gonna go with it." Like, what are your thoughts on what's happening to Western men, Canadian men? Because it seems like there are very few that are willing to actually do hard things and put their own comfort aside.
Well, when it comes to men in particular, I think there's been an decades long at least campaign to denigrate and marginalize men, and it is part of a broader, I think, Marxist psyop. It's
Mhm.
our invaders know that it's the men that they need to worry about. And once upon a time, when we had more traditional roles, men would gladly and proudly throw themselves into harm's way because that's what manning up means. It
Mhm.
means throwing yourself into the breach and taking responsibility, especially for the protection of women and children. And women have these sorts of expectations, but they're different for women for, I think, what are fairly obvious reasons. And it has everything to do with the survival of a society. But since we've basically denigrated the role of men in society and told them for decades that they don't really have a role, they're kind of superfluous, and boys don't need fathers. And I was in elementary school, and they're telling me I got to get in touch with my feminine side, and I'm looking at them like, you got to get in touch with your masculine side. It's even at an early age, I was like, this is BS. No,
Yeah.
maybe I just have a good sense for that kind of thing. But yeah, I think that men are demoralized. We've
Mhm.
taught our society to not to value the unique contribution that men bring to the table. And it's really kind of been out of sight, out of mind. I think there's more awareness of it now. Like younger generations seem to be opening up to the idea that it's like young women are looking at guys on the oil rigs like, I don't think I want to go do that. So I think it's going to come back. It's going to take a few more years, but I try not to be too hard on the guys when it comes to this stuff, because this is the intended outcome of the psychological operation. And really, if we just incentivize men to get back to being men instead of cowing them and shaming them constantly, then we wouldn't have this problem.
Mhm. 100%. Well, and I'm sure you and I share the same belief about about this hiking ban and the ludicrousness of it all, because really it comes down to, well, where do you draw the line then? Like, people are drawing the line back to, well, like, this is to protect people from forest fires. It sounds like a noble cause. Well, during COVID, the noble cause was we have to save lives. Fair enough. But look where they took that. Well, you're not allowed to work and you all have to close your businesses for 2 years. I lost my business during this time period. This is where this leads. And I can be the devil's advocate, and you want to ban campfires. That makes sense. You want to put a
Yeah.
huge fine behind starting a fire? Sure, make it $100,000. Starting fires are bad during fire season, no problem. Even ATVing, we live in a redneck town. I understand that. But I'm curious how many fires have been started by sneakers or Birkenstock.
As far as I'm aware, no sneaker has ever caused any fire. And I've been driving that point home quite a bit because it just goes to show you how absurd all of this is. And in terms of where the line is, I would say it's the law. That's the line that you don't cross. Canada's constitution, that includes the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, applies to everyone in Canada, regardless of citizenship. So it
Mhm.
certainly applies to Tim Houston, the Premier of Nova Scotia. And if he wants to impose measures to reduce the risk of wildfire to the public or whatever it is, whatever the risk is, under our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, those measures must be minimally impairing with my liberties. They are not minimally impairing, they're maximally impairing. Like you said, they could have taken any number of steps, like banning campfires, banning smoking, banning sources of ignition from the woods, but banning sneakers from the woods is a blanket ban. It's maximally interfering. So I would say that
Mhm.
it's not charter compliant on that basis. And there is also a need for the measures to be logically connected to the goal. And like you said, sneakers don't cause fires. So banning sneakers from the woods, there is no logical connection between that and preventing wildfires. And then there is the issue of the $25,000 or is it $28,000 fine, because we're protected against cruel and unusual punishment under Section 12 of the Charter. So even when it was initial lockdowns, those were not charter compliant. And I think at the time I was kind of looking at it like, a minute now, you're not supposed to do this, unprecedented circumstances. But I mean, that just means something new, and there's always something new happening.
Mhm.
And I was like, all right, I'll watch and see how this goes. 2 weeks, right? And as soon as they renew it, I was like, nope, it's gone off the rails. The whole thing's gone off the rails. And totalitarians, they will walk all over you if you give them half a chance. Okay. So that's why I think we need to stick to our rights and
Mhm.
never give them an inch, because they're only going to be emboldened to take it all. So
Yeah.
from now on, the line is the law, and we're never
Yeah.
going to compromise on that.
Well, and I don't see how most people can't draw the comparison. So, okay, if you ban people from walking, I've seen ridiculous things like, oh, well, someone might break their leg, and then a firefighter would have to go and save that person. Oh, okay, fair. Well, you know what? Maybe just don't let people leave their houses in the
I know.
summertime.
Yeah.
If you want to apply that kind of logic, that's actually where it leads us. You can't leave your house in the summertime. 3 months, don't even go outside. And then to that, people be like, oh, well, you're being facetious. That's ridiculous. Well, that's what we did in COVID. And
Yeah.
in 2019, if you had asked any doctor, any disease specialist, hey, if there is a respiratory virus circulating, should we shut down the entire world and close everybody's business for 2 years? They would have said, that's ridiculous. But
Mm-hmm.
because of the media and everything, they just gathered up support to say, like, these ridiculous measures are 100% fine. And we know now, looking back, that didn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm talking about with the line. So I see you getting so much flack on Twitter. I mean, Twitter's the place for flack, but people are calling you selfish. You're risking people's lives. How? By
Yeah.
walking. How?
Well, and this is reminiscent of a broader trend and tactic that we see coming from the left globally, is they use human shields. And I will point you to Marxist professor Judith Butler, who first advanced the idea that gender is a social construct, who recently said that it is extremely important to understand that Hamas is part of the global left. They're part of the global progressive movement. And what is Hamas famous for doing? Using human shields. So every time totalitarians are trying to advance their neo-slavery agenda, they say, if you don't want to be a slave, then you're killing grandma. If you don't want to be a slave, then you're setting everybody's homes on fire. And it just goes on and on like that. So they always advance it using these guilt and shame and fear tactics, just drive everybody absolutely mad with fear. And once you recognize it for what it is, I think it really kind of falls apart. But yeah, there's kind of like no reasoning with people when they're driven mad with fear by propaganda, because you cannot be rational and emotional at the same time. So that was part of why I approached this situation the way that I did, making an appointment to get my $25,000 fine, because I didn't want to get the emotions up. I understood that doing what I was doing, they weren't going to understand it right away. It was going to be perceived as troublemaking and giving them a hard time and things like that. So I think it's important to really, like, this is a good time to really take that temperature down, and put the civil back in civil disobedience. That's what I was hoping to do.
Well, and I'm appreciating that you're doing it with humor, because that's my approach to everything as well.
So
I can't think of any way to get through society right now without humor, because it truly is ridiculous.
yeah, and you're doing it right. I love your short videos there, the ones that are clipped together. They're spot on. And yeah, I mean, people I think understand generally that you have to have fun at work. And the military is no different. And the first lesson that I learned in Afghanistan is that humor is a coping strategy for humans. Because when I stepped off the Hercules, I had never heard so many disturbing jokes in my entire life. The humor gets really dark in a war zone. The only thing blacker than Trudeau's heart is a soldier's humor. I can tell you that right now.
Mm.
And I've even known guys who had problems when they came back to Canada, because they start reflecting on their experience and they're like, "What kind of a monster am I really to say things like I said?" And I've told guys, like, you're not a monster, you're a human. Like, that was how you adjusted to your circumstances, was with mockery, and it kind of takes the sting out of it a little bit. You did what you had to do to get through it with your psyche intact, and jokes don't harm anybody, so it's a net benefit. You did the right thing. So I think that additionally, tyrants cannot take mockery.
Mm-hmm.
I was calling Susan Holt's comments when she was talking about people breaking their legs, the paternalism of the guilty mind. So they, because they've screwed things up so royally, the people who were supposed to have resources in place to keep us alive did not do their jobs. Now they're like, "Oh, you won't stay alive unless we absolutely suffocate you in our love." It's something, it's a theme in like 1984. Like, the last line is Winston Smith. He loves Big Brother. I mean, after having undergone the torture that O'Brien said would make him perfect. Well, that is his perfection, is now he loves his state. And that's what I see a lot of Canadians doing too, and is they put their faith in Big Brother. They love Big Brother.
That's right.
Yeah. And I mean, Nietzsche talked about this too, right? With, in God is Dead, he said that, basically that the more Europe turned away from Christianity, the more they would put the religious impulse into something else, fill that God-shaped hole in the human heart with something else. And that something else turned out to be communism. I think what humans really worship is power, and it's just a component of the tribal instinct, where tribal elders word reigns supreme. It works well to keep apes alive in the ancestral environment, but it's pretty maladaptive to a modern society.
That's right. Yeah, I think it was Russell Brand said humans are designed to worship. People think
Yes,
that
they
we
are.
don't need religion. That's fine. You can take religion out, but then we worship wokeism, communism, materialism. That we'll put something else in there every single
Yeah.
time.
Uh-huh.
Now, it seems to me like the people who are making the laws and making the rules are very disconnected from the reality of those industries. So I bet if it was someone that was actually in forestry, they probably wouldn't be banning walking. Just like the people making laws around how much oil and gas we're able to produce, they're probably not in the energy sector or the farming sector. They're in Ottawa wearing pointy shoes. They had a social service job, or they have the golden handcuffs. They've never actually gotten their hands dirty, worked in these industries. At least that's my perception of a lot of these people. But supremely, a lot of these laws are lazy ways of avoiding the real work. So we're telling people not to walk instead of actually having proper forest management, maybe clearing out the underbrush.
Yes.
COVID, we're like, get a vaccine. Don't worry about actually exercising every day and losing weight and being healthy. That's too hard. You should just take a vaccine.
Mm.
Virtue signaling, like,
Mm-hmm.
let's do a land acknowledgement, which does absolutely nothing, instead of actually addressing the problem, right?
Oh,
It's laziness.
and oh yeah, it's laziness, and these buffoons have been tricked by totalitarians to believe that that their totalitarianism is virtuous. That's what the pitch always is. It's like, if you don't go along with this agenda, then you're a bad person.
Mhm.
And I'm a bad person right now, right?
Me too.
Obviously, that's yeah, yeah. So the media is out there calling me a bad person. Like, I couldn't possibly have a human rights issue to stand on here. But yeah, I mean, that is how they cudgel people into going along. And just look at what we have for politicians.
Yes.
The old party guard, they're the ones who select their candidates, and they seem to be selecting for the candidates that are the most easily controlled. That's why you get a guy like Justin Trudeau in there. It's because he's
Mhm.
easy to control. So I think that what we're seeing in terms of the politics is more like kabuki theater, like the Japanese theater where they have the life-size marionettes, but
Oh,
the
yes.
puppeteers are actually on stage with them, but they wear like these black sentais, so they blend with a black background. So we're not after the marionettes on the stage right now. We're after the shadowy figures in the background. And it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a sustained effort over the next few years, I'm sure.
Mhm.
But what else am I supposed to do with my life? And if we don't shoulder these burdens, then our children will.
So you've been interviewed by some mainstream media outlets, which actually really surprised me.
Yeah.
How have you watched those interviews? Did they spin it? How did they treat you? What were those questions like?
Some of them, it wasn't a lot of spin and vilification, but it's more like the framing. Globalist News was probably the worst offender so far.
Mm-hmm.
They interviewed me for like half an hour, where I said a lot of the things that I'm saying to you now, where I talk about, people died for these freedoms. This is a gross indignity to our fallen, things like that. Like, that doesn't make it in there. And,
Mm-hmm.
they just snip a portion out where they asked me why I put the video on social media. And what I was saying was, we've had a lot of bad precedents set by these activist judges in the last several years. So I think it would go a long way to promoting better decision writing and making if we had a level of public awareness that helped that judge understand that he was under scrutiny. Like, if he felt scrutinized, then he would write a better decision. So they snipped
Mm-hmm.
that out, because the way they were framing the issue was that I was looking for attention. And they
Mm-hmm.
framed me as a right-wing politician and left out the part of, a veteran of Afghanistan and Iraq of 20 years service. They didn't talk about rights at all. They talked about the risk of fights. That's what they do, is they reframe the issue. Don't ever let them frame it about safety. You got to stick to your rights. Don't ever let them frame it about need. It doesn't matter. I have rights. I'm a free
Mm-hmm.
agent, okay, and I may live my life as I see fit, so long as I bring no harm to another, of course. But yeah, I mean, these are the kinds of tactics that they've been engaged in, well, for decades, but they've really intensified since 2020.
It's so funny. It's never a PPC candidate. It's never a conservative candidate. If it's anything two steps right of Karl Marx, it's the far right, the Canadians. I never hear them say leftist, far left, socialist. They never ever say
No,
those words.
no, they don't.
And a lot of people in this movement, there is no one movement, no blanket. People in the freedom space, a lot of us are liberals. Like an actual liberal, or like we used to be, an actual liberal is kind of like live and let live. You do your own thing. That's who
That's me.
a lot of this movement actually is.
Yeah, I mean, that's me. I'm a classical liberal. I'm a Hayek man. Hayek correctly pointed out in the Constitution of Liberty that what we mean when we say a free society is that it is free of coercion. That's not where we live anymore. Left, right, and center, I'm being coerced to get on board with the next political agenda when I just want to be left alone. And it seems
Mhm.
like we're probably at that point now, I think, when the people who just wanted to be left alone are getting active. I know we've been saying that for a while, but I'm literally just a
Mhm.
retired veteran trying to walk his dog in the park. And,
Right.
I can't do that without being conscripted into the government's agenda. And I'm like, look, I did my service, okay? I did my service to this country, and I should, in theory, if we live in a truly free society, I should be able to go the rest of my life without ever having to take another order. And that was the goal, and I am sticking to it. I'm not. They're not bossing me around.
Hmm.
But I think it's demonstrative of the fact that we now live in a more authoritarian society, where the guiding mantra, instead of being "do as you will but don't harm another," is do as I say or else.
And a lot of people love being told what to do. I'm thinking of like Guy Fawcett, who just thinks whatever the law is, that's what's moral. And again, where do you draw the line? Like if they we point this out all the time. This is how the Holocaust happened. It was like
Yeah.
one step at a time, and that was like the law. People were just following the rule books, doing what they were told. That's cowardice.
Yeah. I mean, 1,000%, I agree. These seem to be like some of the easiest lessons one can take from history. I was always trained that simply following orders is not sufficient to satisfy your duties. You have a duty to ensure that your orders are legal and they should be ethical as well. And it all relates back to World War II and the Holocaust. And even just that long ago, one human lifetime ago, like we didn't give a damn about civilian casualties, but like we certainly do now. This is, you know, again, this is a legacy that we're all
Mhm.
supposed to build on, and we're supposed to be applying like the camping rules, leave things a little better than they were when we got here. And as it stands right now, we are utterly failing to do that, to provide a brighter future for generations to come. But you know, I do think that it'll take a few years. Like, D-Day, let me put it to you this way. It's been 81 years since D-Day. 81 years before that was the Battle of Gettysburg, and 82 years before that was the colonial triumph at Yorktown, which is the climactic battle of the American Civil War. So, we are in the cycle of history, and it is every generation's fatal error to assume that they're no longer living in history, that we're out of the woods and we're never going to have to deal with these things because all the
Mhm.
wars are won now. And obviously, we're having to learn a hard lesson, as every generation does. But D-Day was 1940. War wasn't really ended until 1945. So I'd say we got about another 4 years to go.
Where do you think this goes? Do you think this stops at $25,000 hiking fees? Is this a test? Do you believe in climate lockdowns?
I don't really believe that Homo sapiens is sufficiently competent to pull off a conspiracy. I do think there is an agenda. I trace it all the way back to the Chinese Communist Party. A lot of people are looking at the UN and the WEF, but I see both of those as essentially proxies for China. You can check out a book on Amazon called Unrestricted Warfare. It's based on leaked Chinese military documents written by a couple of PLA colonels, Kiao Lang and Wang Shangsu, on Amazon, and they sketched the whole plan out for taking down the United States and the Western world. And it's every greasy, motherless, underhanded commie tactic in the book to subvert and sabotage from within: economic warfare, cyber warfare, cultural warfare, lawfare, you name it. So everything, weaponized migration. That's my term, but that's really what they're talking about. That's what I take from it, is weaponized
Mhm.
migration. And it's the UN Compact on Migration, and the UN audit boards are 60 to 80% Chinese, and there are 90 million members of the Chinese Communist Party. So that's what I'm seeing, and the climate agenda is a big part of that, because they're screaming at the developed Western world with the cleanest energy going. Canada, with some of the cleanest energy you can possibly find anywhere on the planet, and there are all these safety regulations, and women can work there and all kinds of great stuff. We don't use child labor like they do in the Congo for those batteries for Teslas. So like they're screaming at us to shut it all down, but China continues to build 2 coal-fired power plants per week to power themselves, and they've cornered the market on green technology, so they can get more powerful than we've ever been and bankrupt us while getting rich off our demise in the process. That's what I see happening. But good luck telling that to somebody who's trapped in that leftist paradigm that you were just describing there.
I always think that China and Russia and all of
Yes.
our enemies are just laughing at us. Like, look how easy it was to take these guys down. We just
Yep.
gave them TikToks. We confused all the kids. Look, the parents are actually like giving their kids sex changes, and all the men are standing down, and all the liberal women are yelling and making sure everyone follows the. Look how easy that was to destroy that country. Meanwhile,
Yeah.
they're thriving economically, producing things, destroying the planet. Well, they're at it, mind you, but they're laughing. We're so
Yeah.
weak right now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They are laughing at us. And I find it to be such a twisted thing that, it is our desire to be good people that they are exploiting in order to destroy us. And these people that are saying all the nastiest things about me right now, like, those are the good people. They are the good people in their minds. And it is all, again, it's like a cult, like
Mhm.
totalitarian regimes. They mimic religions. It's really more like the state is put in place of God, and they produce the dogma that forms the faith. And if you question the dogma, well, that's heresy. So they just cry heretic and go for the pitchforks. At that point, they get triggered, and they'll do everything they can to destroy you.
Mm.
So I'm having to face the witch hunts yet again. This isn't my first witch hunt, by the way, but I think we're in really dangerous territory because humans are tribal by nature, and tribalism is something for us to overcome. It's another one
Mhm.
of those qualities that will keep apes alive in the ancestral environment, but is maladaptive for modern society. And that's right in The Art of War from the 5th century by Sun Tzu, or I think it's in chapter 13, The Use of Spies, where he really gets into how you subvert a country, you capture the elites, you turn the state against the people will turn against the state, pit all the different ethnicities and religions off one another, and we'll be too busy at each other's throats to see what's going on behind the curtain. We'll stop working together, we'll basically implode on our own, and then the Chinese can come in and impose whatever solution they see fit, because clearly we're not fit to govern ourselves. And it's working. Like you can see this
Mhm.
retribalization. And what comes naturally to humans is not morality, but it's more like an in-group preference coupled with an out-group hostility. So if there are people like within your immediate sphere, the more closely related you are to somebody, the more tightly they are within your moral sphere. And Richard Dawkins even talks about how prairie dogs engage in the exact same kind of selective altruism. But within our tribe, that's our moral sphere. Outsiders tend to be perceived as potential threats, competitors for mates, food, resources, potential carriers of disease. So they're basically vermin, right? And they get run out of town. And that's what they're doing, is they're dehumanizing me at the moment, the tribe, the progressive
Mhm.
tribe, which is the dominant tribe. And that's how authoritarian regimes really work. It's not one strong man dominating the population of an entire country, but he has loyalists. There's a dominant tribe, and the progressive tribe is the dominant one right now. And I've been vilified and marked for witch hunting. The digital burning at the stake, I guess. But I mean, it doesn't bother me terribly. I guess it does, like, and it did for a long time. I think I find it's particularly painful. I think because I'm a veteran, and
Yes.
it's like, are you kidding me? These are the people that I've been serving my whole life.
Yes.
Um, and these are the principles that I've stood for my whole life, and they're telling me that I'm rotten for adhering to them and sticking to them. So it's morally injurious in a
Yes.
sense, but Pharaoh hardened his heart once upon a time, and that's kind of what I think we need to do is just kind of not take it personally. That's what
Mhm.
I always say is, like, when you're going to war, there's two things you got to remember. Number one, you can't take it personal, because if you take it
No.
personally, then you're not going to last. You're going to crash and burn. You're going to burn out, and you're not going to
That's
make
right.
it. And number two, you're not going to save all the children. Like, we are going to take casualties along the way. That's just part of it. So you need to bear that in mind in order to keep a level head, because it is the cooler heads that will prevail. And like I said, you cannot be rational and emotional at the same time.
Yeah, you've done this whole thing really peacefully. And the trolls, I like to always assume it's somebody on a couch in their mother's basement spending all day long on Twitter. That they haven't done
They're
anything for the
sad.
world. I was getting a real kick out of people on Twitter saying that Elon should get his Canadian passport taken away. Regardless of what you think of Elon, they were saying, well, what has he done lately? I was like,
Oh,
pardon? You mean developed a global communication infrastructure system, sending people to Mars, developed electric cars to save the planet? Like, what have you done for your Canadian passport? I'm so
I
curious.
know. Doge, everything. The guy is a
Yeah,
machine.
yeah,
I think Elon is an incredible guy. I'll give the usual caveat. It's like, I don't agree with everything he says.
yeah,
I think he's doing a good job, but I don't agree with everything anybody says, you dummies.
of course.
And I don't worship like you do. I'm not worshiping Elon. I just find that
Yep.
he's a really impressive guy. And he says he wants to help humanity, and I think he is trying to save the
Mhm.
world, because he himself has said, if we go to World War III before we make it to, we're already in it, by the way, but if we go to World War III before we go to Mars, then we might never make it to Mars. And that has been his dream since he was a little boy. So I think that he's definitely on our side. I've been saying that the whole time, and people are saying, "Oh no, he's a secret WEF or something." I'm like,
Mhm.
shut up, you don't know anything. But But yeah, I think he's definitely on our side and definitely a force for the good. And I think that people, like, everybody loved him. The left loved him because he was the Tesla guy, and he's got SpaceX. I have one of his toys here. I use his what do you call it, Starlink,
Oh, yeah.
and yeah, I probably pay twice as much for internet, but at least it's not a Canadian company, so they can't just shut me off. But so like they loved him when he was Mr. Tesla, and then all it took was him to join the Trump team, which by the way is almost entirely comprised of former Democrats, including Trump
Hmm.
himself. And so when he decided to do the Doge thing, then they're out there burning Teslas and burning Tesla dealerships. Like, that's great for the environment, guys. I thought you were all about the environment. No, they're not. They're anti-human. What is the word for that? Misogynist, I think.
Mm.
Anyway,
I mean, that's
they
happened to so many of us. I had a yoga studio and I worked on many, many different First Nations reservations, working with at-risk youth. And then I said we should probably have a choice whether or not we got vaccinated. And all of a sudden I was a racist and a white supremacist. Like, that's how fast like my community turned on me.
and those are the new words for heretic.
Yes.
That's what they're saying, is you are a heretic to the woke religion. And the racism piece is a Chinese Communist Party tactic. Oh my God, it's like right in your face. Like when Globalist News approached Vincent Ke to ask him in his role about facilitating Han Dong's rigging of his leadership race in Don Valley North, he said, he was like, you can't ask me that question because I'm Chinese. And they're like, what are you talking about? He says, well, I'm ethnically Chinese. It's racist to ask me that question. I told him in the email, it's a very racist question because I'm from China. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Global News like stood down and everything on that. But that's what they do. They use these shaming tactics. Shame on you for being born white in Western. You must atone, cast off your old life, prostrate yourself at the feet of the master, which is
Yeah.
me, accept the one true faith of communism.
You said we're already in World War III. Who are we at war with?
Well, I think China, like, it's Axis powers versus Allied powers again, and it's basically all the same ancient empires going to war that always have. And I think that Western powers are essentially allied about as much as we've ever been. I mean, there's France, but screw those guys. And you have, yeah, I mean, what do you expect? There are men who kiss each other, for crying out loud. They couldn't surrender hard enough. And now they're trying to give the Palestinians, instead of rewarding Hamas for October 7th. I mean, God, it's just weak. So it's basically kind of the same allies from the last time we had this go around. But China is in the mix now, whereas previously Japan was the Axis power. Now, here is the case for war. Like, look at Japan. That's the model that works. They just went in there, like, invaded the whole country, said your religion is hereby banned, and your emperor is just a man. He's not a god. And from now on, you're going to be, a Western democracy. And it's a success story. But
Mm-hmm.
we got away from doing things that way with Vietnam because the boomers chickened out. And ever since then, it's all been this like non-interventionist stuff. I think that if you're going to do something like that, you need to go all the way, no half measures, because that just leads to these long drawn out protracted conflicts where we never really get to the point where we've got a stable society like we do in Japan. But I digress. I think, China was weak at that time. China has risen. So the Japanese, they're allied with us, but China has risen, kind of allied with Russia, but Russia is more like a proxy for China. They're a rogue state that gets used by China. They only just established that partnership where now you've got the two of the largest militaries in the world who've signed a pact, and they have the oil and gas going from Russia to China, largest gas supply connected to the world's largest population. Iran has always been allied with Russia, and they sell about 20% of their oil to China, and China was cheering for them when, the Israelis were going in to take out their nuclear facilities. And the Middle East, like, this is what Orwell is describing in 1984, where it's like, we're Oceania, and we've always been at war with East Asia, or no, we've always been at war with Eurasia, or is it East Asia again? So it's really the difference between Russia and China, and they're all squabbling over territories in the south, mostly mostly Africa. in the Middle East. And the Russians have been running this propaganda narrative around colonial settler stuff since the end of the Second World War to destabilize Western colonies in the Middle East and Africa. And they've made all kinds of inroads. We just finally got Assad out of there because he was allied with the Russians and, facilitating the transfer of technology and weapons and harboring Hezbollah and the like. But the Israelis really cleaned house over there. We're taking down all of Iran's proxies, and basically, the Iranian threat is kind of more or less neutralized at this point. But I would still like to see the regime fall, because the regime is not the people. Those people women, getting raped for taking off their hijab and stuff like that. So it'd be nice to see them liberated and have another Japan over there in the Middle East, maybe. But I don't think there's going to be a big invasion. But yeah, it's like China's the center of gravity. They work with Russia. They work with Iran. They use the jihadis against us. They tend to ally with the Shia groups, the Shia powers in the Middle East. We've been trying to ally with the Sunni powers, but the fact of the matter is that jihadis don't really make good allies because, for the most part, they hate our guts.
Yeah.
But even states like Saudi Arabia, they put $80 billion into international terrorism since the late 70s and have a lot to do with the radicalism in Islam these days. It goes back further than that, but they are poised to sign the Abraham Accords, for crying out loud. Maybe when the prince gets out of the way and the king gets in there, they'll sign in onto that. So, I mean, I'm more hopeful for the Middle East right now than I've ever been. Yeah, and it's international communists, basically. The communists are allied with the Islamists, and we have this kind of Hegelian dialectical synthesis into what I like to call Islamunism now. And this is how you end up with Queers for Palestine. It doesn't make any sense to a logical person, but if you're a Marxist and you understand, how Kimberly Crenshaw developed this Marxist praxis of intersectionalism, where it's all the way down to the attractive people stole all their sex appeal from the unattractive people. It's just pitting the have-nots against the haves is what it is at the end of the day. So if you're so-called racialized, then white people stole their prosperity from you and things like this. So it really appeals to the human proclivity for the deadliest of all sins, which is envy. And, you'll get the haves to tear down, or you'll get the have-nots to basically tear out the pillars of their society, which are the smartest and most productive, hard-working people. That's why they're more prosperous. They will tear them down, and those people really are the pillars of our civilization, and the rest of it will just kind of topple on its own. They'll have us conquered without firing a shot. Militarily, they're weak.
Well, and really what it sounds like is the war never actually stopped.
No.
We just end up having these different proxy wars while the balance of power was fighting in like these different groups, these different countries.
Absolutely.
It just never ended.
It never
Now,
stopped.
if this was the state of Canada 25, 30 years ago, would you still have enlisted and fought in the army?
No, I don't think so. I don't think I would have been so inspired. I mean, I understand that, young people need to make a living and stuff like that too, but this is a really tough one to grapple with. On the one hand, I would say, don't serve this evil empire, Gen Z. It deserves to fall. But on the other, I see what they're doing. They're allowing permanent residents into the ranks now. So, of course, the Chinese and Indian and the like are lining up to join the ranks of the Canadian Armed Forces. And these people come from more corrupt, more authoritarian societies where they're just kind of used to governments bossing their people around much more than we're accustomed to. And they're also, that propaganda, say, about the residential schools. Well, I shouldn't say the residential schools, but I mean Kamloops in particular, in India quite a bit. And the Canadian Armed Forces started all this anti-racism training that just lays all the evils of the world on white Westerners, on the feet of white Westerners. And so they're indoctrinating the permanent residents from more authoritarian societies who are non-whites into an anti-white, anti-Canadian, anti-Western Marxist ideology where old stock Canadians are racist baby killers, and they're putting a weapon in their hands. So it's obviously a recipe for democide, essentially. But I don't think there are any. The good news is the Canadian Armed Forces can't do a damn thing. They're utterly decimated, so they can't conduct operations on the best of days. I'm not particularly concerned about them, unleashing the Canadian Armed Forces on Canadians because they can't do anything. But
100%.
you can kind of see like what the aim is in a lot of this, right?
Mhm.
Turning the state against the people, just like Sun Tzu said.
You're clearly not hopeless about Canada. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing right now. What's the best case scenario for this legal battle? I saw that John Carpe is coming in with JCCF. Yeah, what's the best outcome of this case? You've joined the PPC, you've been involved politically, so you clearly do see a light at the end of the tunnel. What's the best case scenario that you foresee in Canada if everything goes your way?
It has always been the case that when our civilization surmounts a major crisis like World War II or the American Civil War or the American Revolution, there is a population boom in the wake of that, as in baby boomers, in the wake of that crisis. And things go back on the economic upswing. We get new technologies, higher standards of living the world has ever seen, and we end up better off in the end. So I think this is where the expression, the night is darkest before the dawn
The fourth
comes from.
turning. Hmm.
It is the fourth turning. Yeah,
We're in
that's
the
what I'm
fourth
dancing around
turning.
here. Yeah.
That's
Okay.
what
So
I
people
see
do know
too.
about this. What's that?
That's what I see too.
Yeah.
It it's not a glass half empty or half full scenario. It's both. It's about to get real bad,
Yeah.
and it's totally necessary to flip this clown world back.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it is. But, what can we do to speed things up? I don't know that we can do anything because I've been screaming about the fourth turning since I got out of the military and telling everybody that it was the boomer generation that destroyed Canada's military. And that's what's happening everywhere. And this is what the fourth turning is all about, it is the baby boomers that are born in the wake of every single major crisis. That's why it's once a human lifetime we go back into one of these crises. It's because the generation that's raised in the wake of the fourth turning, the major crisis, they are raised as indulged. And my read of Freud is that humans are basically born sociopaths, and it is our parents' discipline as toddlers that installs the superego into the mind. And then, that develops based on, social cues and expectations and this kind of thing. But when you're the special and perfect little darlings of the new dawn of the Enlightenment, we can't have old Ward going too hard on Jane Cleaver's perfect little beaver. And so, they have this underdeveloped superego, a lack of a conscience. And I would refer you to, Bruce Cannon Gibney's work, his book, A Generation of Sociopaths, where he basically documents all this stuff, this absolutely degenerate behavior. I mean, this is why they had an AIDS epidemic, for example, and all of the serial killers that you can possibly name, and all of the scandals in the military like not 100% of them, but yeah, it's the leadership. It's not the troops. It's been the baby boomers. We've known that since Somalia, and it was them, from Somalia affair to the serial killer colonel to the grab ass and gaslighting generals. The only thing that really changed is that they got older, and so they destroyed the military first because this is all about natural attrition, and the military has a lower retirement age and a higher rate of attrition. So they reach peak institutional power there first. And as soon as they do that, they start stealing everything that isn't nailed down and raping and murdering women and children. So that's what we're seeing across the board right now, is that as of 2020, according to Neil Howe, the demographer who first forecasted in 1991 that a crisis would threaten our civilization in the year 2020, plus or minus 2 years, that is the time frame within which all of our institutions around the world come under the control of the baby boomers. I mean, this would include like Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin and Yahya Sinwar and Benjamin Netanyahu and you name it. Like, it's the people that are running things right now that are driving all of this. You've got I think like Jody Thomas is the public service that I'm really looking at, because it's Justin Trudeau. Who's always saying, like, people are looking at him like, why are you doing this? And he'll say, we're following the advice of the professional public service. Now, that's the opposite of what a politician is supposed to do. They're supposed to rein those bureaucrats in. But like Jody Thomas She was the one who was the deputy minister at National Defense, who appears to have orchestrated the whole sexual misconduct scandal for all of the generals who probably would not have implemented the vaccine mandate for the military, to sideline them, get Wayne Eyre in there because he's the throne-sniffing sycophant that they're looking for, who will be sufficiently ruthless with the troops to impose a vaccine mandate, and that's what they did. Then she got her promotion to go be Trudeau's right-hand gal as his national security and intelligence advisor. And based on what I heard at the Emergency Measures Act, appears to have been central to the decision to invoke the EMA, and was quite put out that anybody would have any questions as to why she did that. But that's what they're like. I spent 20 years like showing them regulations and orders and things like that came right out of the Somalia affair. They said, remember when the Somalia affair told you guys to run this system this way? Look, it says it right here. And they'll just go, that's not what that says. There's something wrong with you. Are you kidding me? But that's what's happening everywhere right now. And that's why the paradigm is flipped.
When does your court case go down, and how can people support you?
So I don't have a date for the trial yet. We have to submit our notice of intent to contest the fine by 12 September, and then they'll set a trial date. But I'm not fundraising anything personally. The JCCF, Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, they're great. Represented me for my convoy stuff. I'm going to be working with Chris Fleury again of the JCCF, so I'm really happy about that. And if you want to help me to win this fight, then you can donate to the JCCF.
Amazing. I was just talking to John today. Actually, we're going to have him on the show here right away. Good people doing the work that we really need to do right now. I'm glad that they're backing you.
Yeah, me too. I feel much better with them in my corner.
Anything else that you'd like the people to know? Anything that they're missing about this case?
I don't think so. I usually just try to drive home the fact that I see this as a simple matter of civic duty on my part. I've been standing on guard for thee my whole life, and I don't really know how to do anything else anymore. So here I am. And if we want to get back to being the true North and strong and free, then we got to get back to standing on guard for thee. So I hope that the example that I provided will help people to marshal their courage and approach this in a very civil manner. As an individual, I think, as I've demonstrated, like, you can go out and do something that can really make trouble for the people in charge. You don't have to get together in a big, massive protest or anything like that. And I don't think they care if you protest. They're not listening to your protest. They don't care how much you do that. And, there always tends to be, there's some burnout out there in the freedom movement because of all the drama that's associated with any time a group of people ever try to do something together. So, you can just do it as an individual, like I did. Spare yourself all the drama and handle it, your own way. And you'd be surprised. I think the ticket now is dragging these people into court. We got to be taking some action that has some teeth. And you, as an individual, can absolutely drag these people into court. It's just a matter of figuring out your own strategy. And I think this is the way forward.
I love that. Yeah. You don't have to be in a big group. Look at all the attention that you are bringing to this case. And I love that you're just showing people they don't need to be afraid about it.
No, and it's just that's a good a good point too. I am afraid. Like, people will say to me that, I'm glad that you're not afraid. And it's like, I'm afraid like everybody else. But courage is the act of overcoming that fear and doing the right thing anyway.
That's right.
So that's why I say that I hope the example that I tried to provide will help others to marshal their courage too.
That's right. And P.S. listeners, if you are going downtown right now, doing a little shopping, walking around with your shoes on, you should probably take off those sneakers because you might just burn down your whole town if you're not careful. So just watch that. Bare feet, everybody.
No kidding.
Wild. Well, thank you for coming on the show. I will make sure to tag your Twitter account below, your X account, as well as the JCCF, so listeners can go and support them. Perfect. And thanks for your time today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it, so I appreciate it.